What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Something we all know about, but maybe don't pay attention to, is Pokémon categories. Now, you can categorize Pokémon by their types, or egg groups, or any number of things, but this is different. You've heard the Pokédex before, when they're giving information, say, Skarmory, the Armor Bird Pokémon. This is its category, a general explanation of what the Pokémon is all about, whether it be a physical attribute or something more in line with its character. For instance, the new Pokémon Dreadnought is known as the Bite Pokémon, and considering its powerful jaws, it's not hard to see why. However, Poochyena and its evolution Mightyena already had that classification years ago. With hundreds of different pocket monsters, it's no surprise that some categories would be shared amongst otherwise unrelated Pokémon. So I thought it would be intriguing to go through and see which Pokémon are similar enough to share categories with one another. And we will only be using exact matches, as there are certain discrepancies, such as Arrokuda being known as the Rush Pokémon, while the Rushing Pokémon is Linoon. And some Pokémon merely share additional descriptors in their categories as well, whereas other Pokémon don't even keep the same categories between their different forms. So you never truly know what you're going to find in this unpredictable aspect of Pokémon, which is why it's prudent to go through all the ones that match. Starting alphabetically, we have the Armor Pokémon, referring to both Donphan and Tyranitar. Both of these Pokémon are some of my favorites from Johto, being fantastic designs that still hold up. But knowing that no other Pokémon has been deemed worthy of this Armor category since Gen 2, makes them stand out even more as exceptionally resilient powerhouses in the game. The Bagworm Pokémon refers to Pineco and Fortress, as well as Burmy and Wormadam. It's paying attention to classifications like this that would have clued people in on why Pineco isn't a grass type, since it's only camouflaged to avoid predators like real bagworms. But they can both end up as bug and steel types, so that's pretty cool. We already know that Jigglypuff is the Balloon Pokémon, as well as its evolution, Wigglytuff, and its pre-evolution, Igglybuff. But the category also contains Quillfish and, predictably, Drifloon. Just don't get them all too close together, or your Quillfish will do in the others. The Bat Pokémon denotes Zubat, and its evolutions, Golbat and Crobat, quite obviously, but also the Unova Pokémon, Woobat. So for anyone still holding out that Woobat isn't simply a ripoff of this previous line, it's not looking too good. Next is the Bivalve Pokémon, and while that might sound intimidating, it really only means a type of invertebrate with a hinged shell. So that includes the likes of the Shellder and Cloyster line, but also Clamperl. Don't expect too many more Pokémon to ever be added to this category, since the qualifications are rather specific. The brutal Pokémon are Sharpedo and Hydreigon. This makes sense for both of them, as they are a pair of dark types, but it also matches their vicious nature with an underlying cruelty that lets you know just how in trouble you would be if you ever ran into one of these in the wild. Now the exact opposite of that, we have the Butterfly Pokémon, that being Butterfree and Beautifly. It's not hard to see why, it's literally in their names. Although it does beg the question, how would they even know what a standard butterfly is if they've never seen one? The C's bring us the Cactus Pokémon of Cacnea and Maractus. Again, nobody's really shocked to hear this, but sometimes you just gotta call a spade and move on. Next up is the Cave Pokémon, which includes Gabite and Druddigon. Druddigon I associate with caves, since it's generally the only place that you can find them in any given game. But Gabite is a little trickier. Its line are not always found exclusively in caves. However, they are described as living there by the Pokédex, possibly even digging themselves fresh ones wherever they might be. The Cheering Pokémon are Plusle and Minun. Not really surprising that these two would share a category, since they are so connected, but they're technically different species. So let's move on from these cheerleader Pikachu clones. The Chimp Pokémon are Chimchar and the new Grookey. Interesting that this category seems reserved for starters. Maybe one day we'll get a water-type version and complete the set. The Coal Pokemon category has the wonderful Torkoal, as well as Roly-Poly, Carkol, and Colossal. These are all Pokemon that I like, so if you would get these as a Christmas present for being bad, the naughty list might not be such a bad place to be. The Cocoon Pokemon aren't exactly hard to guess, with Metapod, Kakuna, Silcoon, and Cascoon. It's actually more surprising that more Pokemon aren't in this category as well. But it is worth noting that in the Japanese, Metapod, Silcoon, and Cascoon are all called the Chrysalis Pokemon, while Kakuna is on its own as the Pupa Pokemon. But that sort of thing does happen with translations, even sometimes swapping categories, like with Wobbuffet and Shelgon. But all those words are synonyms for cocoon anyway, so it's close enough. The continent Pokemon is both Groudon and Torterra, and you can really see why for both of them. Groudon is the living embodiment of the land itself, and Torterra is lugging around its own specific biome. And aside from other pairs of already connected Pokemon, these two are probably the closest in the national dex out of any of these shared categories. Now we have the dancing Pokemon, being Oricorio. But even with 4 forms, that's not enough to warrant its own spot. This naturally selecting bird wouldn't have even made the cut if Galarian Mr. Mime hadn't had a category change. Its tap dancing ways have now put it in the dancing group with Oricorio, which is slightly strange since the Japanese name, and even that of its evolution, still involve Barrier, which is its old classification. The Darkness Pokemon does not include Darkrai. In fact, you would think that it would need to be some of the toughest and scariest Pokemon out there, but it's only Murkrow and Sableye. Sure, they are both Dark types, but they seem to be some of the most jovial Dark types around, content with minor pranks and petty theft. Maybe it's more of a literal nighttime thing. The Devious Pokemon used to be a standalone with Purloin, but with Sword and Shield it got a partner in Morgrem. Fittingly another Dark-type trait, it shows just how crafty these Pokemon can be, exemplified in the new signature move, False Surrender, which plays dirty. The largest of any category is the Dragon Pokemon. This includes the Horsey line with Seadra and Kingdra, Dratini, Dragonair, and Dragonite, Salamence, and Goodra. So not only does this leave out most other dragon types, but actually has Pokemon that aren't dragon at all. That's it, little seahorse, you dream big. The category of Drill Pokemon contains Nidoqueen, Nidoking, Rhydon, and its later evolution, Rhyperior. So this classification is obviously reserved for buff ground types that use their horns to dig through the earth with little to no effort. You'd think that they would have invited Excadrill, but they didn't. The Drowsing Pokemon refers to Musharna and Komala, not Drowsy. But this actually fits better, since these Pokemon essentially go through their entire lives asleep. So they literally are drowsing at all times, not just kind of tired like the fancy-fingered Taper. All Pokemon come from eggs, but the only egg Pokemon are Execute and Chansey. For anyone tired of explaining that these are seeds and not actually eggs, you can blame the Pokemon Company themselves for placing them in this category. As for Chansey, I guess the lesson is that whatever's in your pouch will define you more than a lifetime of service and healing others. The Electric Pokemon category is, again, not simply for all electric types. In fact, it only holds Electabuzz, Zapdos, and Elekid. However, in the Japanese, the first two are called the Electric Shock Pokemon, while Elekid remains unchanged. Guess the English didn't want to create a new category just for the little guy and let him hang out with the others. The Ember Pokemon are Simisear and Fletchinder. Fletchinder easily fits here in my mind, since it has only just begun to be a fire type. What doesn't flow as well is Simisear. It's a second stage Pokemon that evolved from the High Temp Pokemon. So are you saying that this fire is dying out? No wonder he's Japan's least favorite Pokemon. The category of Emotion Pokemon belongs to Kirlia, Mesprit, obviously, and also the new Gen 8 Pokemon Indeedee. Well, I guess being generally peeved does count as an emotion. So really, if you need an emotional support creature of any kind, these would be a pretty good bet. The Eon Pokemon are Latios and Latios. Of course these twin psychic Pokemon would be so connected that they would have the same category. But the name itself is thought-provoking, with Eon implying that these creatures are fairly ageless. Oh, apparently the Japanese has them listed as the Infinity Pokemon, so I guess they're pretty timeless after all. The Fairy Pokemon category houses Clefairy, Clefable, Snubbull, and Granbull. And boy did they hit the nail on the head with these, since they all actually switched from normal to pure fairy types in Gen 6. Although part of me wonders if they hadn't planned on the Snubbull line getting the new type, but they literally called it the Fairy Pokemon, so their hands were tied. The Firefly Pokemon are easy enough with the similarly forgettable Lightning Bug duo of Volbeat and Illumise. Maybe one day we'll get something better in this category. The only ones in the Fish Pokemon order are Magikarp and Feebas. Now, you might have noticed there are a great many Pokemon based on fish. However, I suppose each of those have better qualities by which to describe them, instead of being ugly and weak like these two. Seriously, like they'll ever grow up to be anything worthwhile. The category of Flame Pokemon was incredibly popular in Gen 1, containing Charmeleon and Charizard, Flareon and Moltres, and also later Infernape. There have been plenty of fire types in the intervening years that I might think could fit as a flame, but I guess there's something extra hot about these earlier entries. The flower Pokemon are Vileplume, Bellsprout, and Bellossom. Again, there are potentially Pokemon that are more flower-like than these, but there's one that is incredibly close in the flowering Pokemon category. I wouldn't even bring it up, except that it got another member besides Lilligant in Gen 8 with Gossifleur. I guess the difference is that these Pokemon are continually flowering, while the others have since ceased. The category of fossil Pokemon used to belong exclusively to Aerodactyl, despite all of the other fossils over the years. But it got a whole lot bigger in Gen 8, since all of the Galar fossils were included. There's not really anywhere else they could have put them, unless they made a new one called Mashed Up Half Creatures. Every now and then we get the Fox Pokemon, with the likes of Vulpix, Ninetales, Fennekin, Braixen, and Delphox, and most recently, Nickit and Thievul. But I think we've learned that clearly the most important requirement for a fox is the warm color palette. The Fresh Snow Pokemon might not be what you think, in Glaceon and Vanillite, because if you're going to go for a snow Pokemon, you want to be sure it's the nice and fresh stuff. But speaking of fresh squeezed, the next category is the Fruit Pokemon, which comprises Tropius for its lovely banana neckbeard, and Bounsweet with its evolutions Steenie and Tsarina. Can you imagine how good they would smell? The Happiness Pokemon, Togetic and Blissey, obviously mean that everyone in the world besides the Johto region is miserable. Or at the very least the Unova region is, since they have to deal with the hostile Pokemon, which are Basculin and Zweilous. They are both kind of in pairs, so I wonder what it is about sharing that makes them so hostile. The Iceberg Pokemon predictably are Regice and Avalugg, giant Pokemon made out of blocks of pure ice. Surely we don't have to go more into this. The Jewel Pokemon denotes another somewhat related pairing in Carbink and Diancie, since it is said that Diancie is formed out of a standard Carbink. The category of the Land Spirit Pokemon is similar in that all of the Tapus share the same label. I'm assuming the land to which it is referring is each of their own personal islands to guard. The classification of Larva Pokemon is relatively new, only applying to Grubbin and Blipbug, which is kind of crazy considering all the opportunities they've had up until now. Not even Larvesta. The light Pokemon are Lantern and Ampharos, both being electric types from Johto, but more importantly, having quite powerful luminescent bulbs to shine said light. The Lightning Pokemon refers to Jolteon and Electrike. However, in Japanese, Jolteon is instead the Thunder Pokemon, which is close but distinctly separate. Next is the Manipulate Pokemon, which are Grumpig and Gothorita. I guess I never realized, but there are numerous dex entries about Grumpig controlling the minds of others through dance, and Gothorita leading people astray through hypnosis or taking over the bodies of sleeping children? Sheesh, how come these Pokemon haven't been put on the creep list? The Meteorite Pokemon are Lunatone and Solrock. But if we could just pause for science, I would like to applaud those in charge, since Minior is the Meteor Pokemon. Once a rock from space falls to Earth, it is called a meteorite, but only while in the atmosphere is it called a meteor. And the upper atmosphere is where Minior live their lives. But to get a Meteoroid Pokemon, we'd have to go out into deep space. Maybe Deoxys can pick one up. The Mole Pokemon category holds the Diglett and Dotrio line, as well as Drillbur. One of them seems more apparent, but then again, we've never seen what's under a Diglett to be sure. The Mouse Pokemon category encompasses Rattata and Raticate, Pikachu and Raichu, as well as Sandshrew and Sandslash. It seems to be a pretty Gen 1 thing, although it does all carry over into their Alolan forms as well. And there are several variations amongst other Pokemon that have mouse at the root of their category. The category of Mushroom Pokemon is filled with Paris and Parasect, Shroomish and Breloom, and Fungus and Amoonguss, each being two-stage grass types. But surprisingly, leaves out the Morlo line, who would be a perfect match for all of these requirements. Good thing this isn't Mario. The Mystic Pokemon has nothing to do with the superior team in Pokemon Go, but rather are Xatu and Flygon. These two Pokemon do have a sort of elegant mystery surrounding them, so I think it's appropriate that they be defined by their enigmatic nature. The Ninja Pokemon, Ninjask and Greninja, if they couldn't already be identified as such by their other attributes, helped out by putting the category right in their names, in case you got confused. Penguins are my favorite animal, so it's no surprise that my favorite starter, Piplup, is the Penguin Pokemon, along with its evolution, Prinplup. They used to be alone until the newly minted Ice-Cube joined in as well. The Pinsir Pokemon are Kingler and Scizor, obviously for their giant pincer hands. See Pinsir? These are what pincers look like. The Playful Pokemon sounds like it might be fun. However, when your category contains Monferno and Pancham, you know that it's not entirely innocent. In fact, the original translation has them as naughty and mischievous, so watch your back around these two. The Poison Moth Pokemon might sound fairly specific, but then again, Venomoth and Dustox do bear certain similarities, so it makes sense that there would be more than one. The Poison Pen Pokemon is a little different, since for ages this category only housed both genders of Nidoran, as well as Nidorina and Nidorino. Only in the Ultra games did they receive any company with Poipole and Naganadel. Now I can definitely see the Poison Pen traits on these ones. The Puppy Pokemon is predictably for cute first-stage dog Pokemon, like Growlithe, Lillipup, Rockruff, and Yamper. It's nice to know that most places you'll go will have the option of an adorable pet if you so want one. The Rabbit Pokemon refers to Buneary and Lopunny, as well as Scorbunny and Raboot. All of these are pretty straightforward hares, so why overcomplicate things? I was honestly surprised that the Royal Pokemon category only had two tenants, with Slowking and Pyroar. There are a number of other Pokemon that seem to possess the necessary levels of regality, but I suppose only these two have the divine right to rule. The Scout Pokemon is Sentret, obviously, and also, even more obviously, Patrat, once again adding fuel to the fire for accusations of Univa's plagiarism. The category of the Sea Lion Pokemon has Seal and Dugong, as well as Poplio. I'm not sure Dugong is quite as Sea Lion as the others. I might have called it something like the Aurora Pokemon, which would have put it in the category with Suicune, but hey, I'm not in charge. The entire line of Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, and Venusaur are known as the Seed Pokemon, but that also includes Sunkern. Really, it's not that surprising when you think about it. What else were they going to call it? The Shellfish Pokemon refers to Blastoise, as well as Kabuto and Kabutops. Thing is, None of these are necessarily shellfish. Certainly not Blastoise. But it does ease my mind to know that the Japanese just called them the shell Pokémon. Just because something's in the water doesn't automatically make it a fish, guys. The stag beetle Pokémon are Pinsir and Vikavolt. Both of these are ferocious bug types, and you can really see the resemblance with the Mega Pinsir form. The star-shape Pokémon are Staryu and Cleffa. And you can tell that that's true just by looking at them. But it can't be a coincidence that both of these two Pokémon are often fabled as having originally come from outer space. Maybe there's something more to the star shaping than we know. The Sun Pokémon category includes Sunflora, Espeon, and Volcarona. Solgaleo is also technically the Sun Pokémon, but they spell it all weird in the old-timey alchemical way. The Tadpole Pokémon follows a trend that we've seen of an entire line of older Pokémon, in this case being Poliwag, Poliwhirl, and Poliwrath, being joined by a solitary Pokémon later, this time being Tympole. I guess that just highlights the wide array of unique categories in more recent generations. The Thunderbolt Pokémon are Electivire and Zebstrika, two awesome, powerful electric types. In the Japanese, they are called the Thunder and Lightning Pokémon, so maybe they can settle that dispute between Jolteon and Electrike from earlier. The Tiny Bird Pokémon mantle is quite apt, as it denotes Pidgey, Spearow, Natu, and now Rookidee, all of which are only a foot high or even shorter. Huh. I always thought Spearow was bigger than Pidgey, given what it turns into. Guess that's why you read the decks. The creatures that warrant the category of the Vibration Pokémon are Vibrava, of course, and Palpitoad and Seismitoad, signifying their powerful voices. So if you're ever needing a makeshift massage chair, you might pick up some good vibrations from these Pokémon. The Volcano Pokémon are once again exclusively Johto monsters, with Quilava and Typhlosion, along with the legendary Entei. And Johto doesn't even have real volcanoes like other regions do. Both of the new box art legendaries, Zacian and Zamazenta, are known as the Warrior Pokémon. You can tell that they mean business by all of the battle scars they have in their alternate forms. The category of the Water Bird Pokémon could be a lot bigger, but currently it only houses Pelipper and Ducklet. But I have a feeling that we'll see it crop up again in the future. Next, the Wily Pokémon used to be just one in Nuzleaf, but it makes the cut with the newly added Impidimp, being an equally sneaky dark type. And we end the list of shared categories with the Worm Pokémon, which refers to Caterpie, Wurmple, and the new Pokémon, Snome. That's how I say it, I refuse to say it any other way. There's something to be said of these simple bugs that embrace their true nature, and don't try and overcomplicate their status more than is necessary. So, those are every category shared by different Pokémon. What do you think of this often obscure aspect of the Pokémon world? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!